What's going on, guys? I am back, and today I finally have time to actually start getting into this PED discussion series. So I've discussed it previously. If you didn't see the intro video for this series, it was kind of an overview of my thoughts on PEDs in general, but I want to put a series out there that kind of helps people understand on a basic level what the compounds that we often see mentioned in the bodybuilding world and that you might be tempted to start using as a bodybuilder mean, what they do, kind of the base level functionality for these things, right? Now, this isn't going to be intended to be this whole scientific breakdown. I'm not going to break down chemical and compound structures and go into exact mechanisms of action and routes of administration, and like all this different shit. We're not going to break down things that granularly, but I do want to break down what a compound does at a high level and what that means for you as a bodybuilder. And one of the most often misunderstood, misapplied, honestly just lack of proper information out there in general compounds in bodybuilding is insulin. And so I thought this would be a great one to start the series off with. I know a lot of people are probably not ever going to need insulin. And I want to kind of preface this video with that and saying that this probably isn't a compound you're really going to need, depending on what your goals are. If you genuinely want to pursue high-level bodybuilding, then yes, it's going to come into play at some point, most likely. But we'll kind of get to that in a minute. The point being, this is going to cover a basic overview of the purpose of insulin, what insulin is used for, and why we use it in bodybuilding. I don't really ever give any advice on how to apply these things. If you want me to give you that advice, I offer coaching. So check that out. The link's down below, and I'll put my coaching link up here too. On that note, let's go ahead and hop into insulin and its applications for bodybuilding. The main reason that we use insulin, there's really two of them. And these two can be broken down into its anabolic potential, its anabolic benefit, and its preventative benefit, okay? So more so, if we're trying to weigh those things as a scale, I would say it's 95% its preventative benefit, 5% its anabolic benefit. So I kind of view insulin more as a prophylactic rather than a performance enhancer, and I think that's how most people should view it. There are some benefits when it comes to increased protein synthesis, glycogen storage, these somewhat anabolic properties, but I don't really think you should ever look at insulin and apply insulin for those reasons. Even as a high-level competitive bodybuilder, I don't think it's necessary. I think the main reason, so we can kind of almost exclude that second reason there, the main reason that you would take insulin or utilize insulin is as a preventative compound. Now, prevent what, you might ask? Well, there's kind of two components to this conversation. Most often, in fact, you in my opinion, should be running growth hormone as a modern day bodybuilder. And alongside growth hormone use comes a lot of potential negative side effects. Beta cell burnout, insulin sensitivity problems, glucose increase, all of these things are kind of tied to growth hormone usage. You need to have something in place to counteract that. And really, I don't think you're ever going to need to touch insulin if you're not using growth hormone. Now, again, not going to get too much onto the growth hormone conversation. That's a topic for another time. But assuming we are putting insulin in place to help with the potential side effects of growth hormone or the potential negatives of growth hormone, the main things we're going to be looking to do is avoid beta cell burnout and avoid diabetes. Lower that glucose and make sure your glucose isn't rising rapidly and beyond what it needs to. We want to keep glucose, blood glucose in acceptable ranges. For me, I personally deem an acceptable range to be 90 or below. When a client gets to 90 or when I see myself at 90, it's usually time to reassess and start adding more prophylactics. That can come in the form of metformin, a basal insulin, a rapid acting insulin if basal insulin is already at peak, or even just food changes. Obviously, everything that you can do with these drugs, you can do to a very small extent with your food choices as well. You have to remember that as a competitive athlete in an off-season situation, you're going to be pushing food volumes incredibly high. You're going to have glucose rising even if growth hormone isn't in place. And the answer to how we counteract that is most often going to be metformin or insulin. Metformin has its limitations, and there's also benefits to implementing insulin. But for the sake of this conversation, we're going to stick with insulin as the application. And more often than not, too, it's a co-therapy with both of those. You heard me mention Lantus or basal insulin or rapid-acting insulin a minute ago. So before getting into how we apply insulin, we get into what types of insulin are there. There are a lot of different types of insulin, but the two that we are going to be concerned with most as bodybuilders will be rapid-acting insulin and a basal insulin, okay? Or long-acting insulin. A rapid-acting insulin is pretty much exactly what it sounds like, and a long-acting insulin is also pretty much exactly what it sounds like. These are characterized by different onsets, different peaks, and different total durations, okay? So when I say peak, it's when it's at its peak effectiveness, and when I say total duration, it's the total time that that compound is effective within your body. Onset is, again, exactly what it sounds like, how long it takes for that compound to actually start having an effect within the body. For what most people understand about insulin, what most people have heard about insulin, what most people know online about insulin, first I want to say it's fucking wrong, most likely. Second of all, I want to say it's probably about rapid-acting insulin. If you don't know, if you've never heard rapid or long-acting, you've probably heard Humalog and Lantus. Humalog is rapid-acting insulin. Lantus is a long-acting or basal insulin, okay? So rapid-acting insulin is going to have an onset time of up to about 15 minutes or less, rather, would be an accurate way to put that. It's going to peak about 60 minutes to 90 minutes or an hour and a half after taking it, and then it's going to be active in the system for 3 to 5 hours. It's a relatively short window, okay? Usually 2 meals worth of window, okay? This is where we see a lot of misinformation online. It's how to apply insulin and what it's used for. I think a lot of the people who go on like Reddit and read some bullshit think that insulin is this crazy anabolic compound. They need to take a fuck ton of it before they go work out, shove carbs down their throat, hit the gym, and get a crazy pump. And they think, wow, insulin gave me this crazy pump. No, the 300 grams of carbs you just shoved down your fucking throat gave you the pump. It's the insulin, yes, it has some effects to that, but that's not really the reason or the way to apply insulin. More often, and what I always start with when applying this to myself or clients, is a basal insulin, Lantus. The reason we use basal insulin or Lantus insulin, which has an onset time of about an hour to an hour and a half, no peak, and then a total active time of about 24 hours, give or take, we only have to take it once per day. It's a once per day application that doesn't have this crazy drop off of blood glucose and then this crazy rise after it wears off. It has a steady decrease effect over a 24-hour period. Is it as big of a drop off? No, but that's not what we're using it for. We're simply using it to help counteract consistent glucose and A1C rise over the course of a long off season where food volumes are increasing and growth hormone is high or probably increasing as well. And we only have to use it once per day. It is more safe. It is easier from an adherence perspective. And honestly, for what we're using it for, more effective. We'll start with a basal insulin dosage once it's needed. And again, my goal with a client is to keep their glucose 90 or below. And I don't like to see A1C levels in an off-season setting get higher than about 5.3%. Obviously, that's still within normal range, even if you're 5.4, 5, 6, whatever. I think 5.7 is the upper limit on testing. But we want to see it at 5.3 or below, ideally. And a basal insulin, alongside something like metformin, can really help bring that into acceptable ranges. The reason we would apply rapid-acting insulin is a little bit different than that. Yes, it's going to have an impact on glucose, but it's not going to have as holistic of an impact. It's not going to have this systemic impact over a longer period of time like what we're measuring with A1C, right? It is instead used when we have an acute spike in glucose and we want to kind of counteract that acute spike and also potentially for other benefits as well. So the time where I personally apply my rapid-acting insulin is pre-workout, because pre-workout is, I think, my second largest meal by carbohydrate volume of the day. I take my rapid acting insulin with that meal because I know I'm putting a lot of carbs in. I'm also going to have carbs during my workout. And my post-workout window, there's also a lot of carbs. It's my highest carb meal of the day because we have the most carbohydrate and most food intake in general around that peri-workout window, pre, intra, and post. Because we have the highest level of food intake at that point, I know that that's going to be the point of the day where utilizing insulin is going to help stabilize my blood glucose and also kind of help with some of that nutrient uptake from those meals. So it provides the most benefit during that period. So the reason I implement a rapid acting insulin then is to help with that peri-workout window. It just makes sense. Not everybody needs to do that. Again, you don't necessarily need one or the other. If there is an insulin that I would recommend on a generalization more often, it's going to be that Lantus insulin because it's going to have the larger effect. It's very rare, I shouldn't say very rare, but there's very few people who actually need to take a rapid acting insulin with a singular meal because that single meal's carbohydrate volume is so high that it's going to cause such a rapid jump. But keep in mind, when I say it affects the peri-workout window, yes, rapid acting insulin is going to go into effect in about 10-15 minutes, but it's going to be active in the body for 3 to 5 hours, which covers my pre, intra, and just about post-workout window as well. So we get the effect throughout all of those meals, which is super, super, super beneficial. That is the main reason I would implement rapid acting insulin, or that's how I do it, right? There's obviously other scenarios we might need to do it. You know, I've seen other applications where if we have someone who is dosing growth hormone multiple times per day, which again is not what I would advise, but it's kind of old wisdom that some people still do. If you have someone who's dosing growth hormone multiple times per day, they might dose, you know, one of their doses of growth hormone pre-workout. And that's going to cause a spike in blood glucose alongside the high carb meal, alongside the intra-workout shake. That's a good time to implement rapid as well because it's helping to counteract that more rapid glucose spike that we're seeing due to those external factors, whether it's growth hormone or food. So there's different applications, and ultimately it comes down to understanding why are we applying this compound, not just what's the general rule of thumb for applying it, because it's going to vary person to person. But again, speaking generally, I will say more often than not, it's more beneficial for someone to utilize Lantus over a rapid acting insulin in a bodybuilding context. Now, we're going to get into the negatives of insulin. And truthfully, I think there are very few negatives, but I will say there are a couple that I hear parroted online a lot that are either overstated, just outright incorrect, or kind of half-truths. The first one is that, oh, don't fuck with insulin. You're going to go into a coma and die. You have to really mess up with your insulin to do that, okay? I'm not saying it's impossible. If you're intelligent about your insulin usage and you know why you're using it and how you're applying it, it's not going to be a problem. Now, can that happen? Yes. If you go hypoglycemic and you go into a coma and pass out and die, it can very well happen, right? I think more often the acute danger is going hypo and then, you know, having a blackout situation and crashing your car into something on the way to or from the gym or whatever, right? Something I always advise my clients is, even though obviously we're not using these crazy amounts of insulin that are just like, you know, I'm not telling someone to go take 40 IU of rapid acting insulin. Even though we're not doing things in this really weird, crazy, dangerous manner, I always advise someone who is on exogenous insulin to carry around just a little pack of like sugary candy, sugar pills. You know, diabetics have them. If you ever feel yourself going hypo, take a couple. That's it. Simple as that, okay? Because you'll know when you go hypo. I think a lot of people who haven't used insulin will say, man, how am I going to know? What if I just go hypo and I don't even know it and I die? Oh no, you're going to know. It's like that. You go from, you know, just being normal to being like, oh, holy shit. You feel kind of lightheaded, kind of dizzy, sweat starts pouring. For me, I get really irritated and agitated. I'm hypersensitive to everything. I'm like, okay, fuck, it's not good. And you're gonna know it. The other big complaint I see online with insulin all the time is insulin makes you fat. Insulin makes people so fat. No, it doesn't. You know why insulin makes people fat? Because they're idiots. They take 30 IU of insulin, and then they're like, okay, I took 30 IU, now I need to eat 300 grams of carbs right now. It's like they're not getting fat because of the insulin. They're getting fat because they're taking 3 times, 3 additional meals worth of carbs all at once because of their insulin. Never build your diet around insulin usage. Build your insulin usage around your diet. So instead of saying, okay, I need to take 10 IU of insulin, so I need 100 grams of carbs, you should think, oh, I have 80 grams of carbs with this meal. I need to take 8 IU of insulin. And you might ask yourself, how do you know how much to take? That is a hugely, hugely independent thing. Some people need 1 IU per 10 gram of carbs. Some people need 1 IU for 20 grams of carbs. It varies a lot. There's a lot of trial and error with that, right? And a lot of insights that your coach can offer if you're coached as well. But it's ultimately a good starting point that I give people is start with about 1 IU for every 20 grams of carbs. So if you have a 100 carb meal and you're gonna start taking insulin, we're gonna start you with 5 IU of insulin for that meal. And honestly, I'm even a little bit more conservative anymore, where I will start for every 100 grams of carbs at 3 IU. Very, very low. We know 3 IU isn't going to have a negative effect, but we just want to be sure, right? That's just more of a safety thing than anything else. That being said, these things you see online about people who take 40 IU of rapid acting, slam a milkshake, and then go to the gym, that's stupid. That's why people get fat on insulin. It's not because of the insulin. It's because they're fucking stupid. So in summary, I just kind of want to do a point-by-point breakdown of everything we talked about. Insulin is used mainly for glucose management as a prophylactic compound, especially in conjunction with growth hormone in the enhanced athlete. Rapid-acting insulin and long-acting insulin both have their uses, but more often than not, I will apply a basal insulin, a long-acting insulin, before I will apply a rapid-acting insulin. They can also be used in conjunction when needed. You need to recognize hypoglycemia and the symptoms so that you can react accordingly if you experience hypoglycemia yourself. Always carry some sugar pills on you, and always keep a blood glucose meter within reach so that if you fear you may be hypo, you can verify. If you're really hypo, you're gonna know. I guarantee that. But just to be safe, keep it on you. It takes up this much fucking space. Keep it somewhere close. Keep one in your car, keep one in your bag, keep one in your home. There you go, you're covered. Always use accurate tools to measure your insulin, okay? Insulin pens are kind of the commonality. If you draw insulin out of a vial, triple fucking check yourself before you take your insulin. I don't want someone thinking they're taking 10 IU and accidentally taking 100. That's why we use easy to use pens which dose this automatically. That makes it way easier, and I highly recommend and prefer that. Last but not least, do not build your diet around your insulin use. Build your insulin use into your diet. All of those things will make sure that you are successful with applying insulin. Now, when should you apply those things? How should you apply them in practical situations? How long should you run it for? All of that kind of stuff. It's all very individual. If you have individual questions like that, again, I offer coaching. Shameless plug. So if you want to take advantage of that, reach out. I'd be happy to work with you. I'm not saying I'm going to put you on insulin, but if we need it, we'll tell you how to do it right. Simple as that. That about covers it for this episode of the PED discussion series, guys. I, again, just wanted to provide a high-level overview. We're not going to break down compounds super in-depth here, but I really want to make sure that these high-level concepts are understood and we can kind of disperse some of the misinformation that's been floating around out there for years and years and years online. And on that note, guys, I will be back on Thursday with my check-in video. I will be back next week with my next PED series video, and you'll see all of my training throughout the week. So until next time, guys, take it easy.